In this video, we'll explore the most idiotic safari attacks ever recorded, from a man who taunted a wild elephant for content to a drunk backpacker who ignored every crocodile warning sign. But first, we begin on the waters of northern Uganda, where one man's impatience put him directly in the jaws of Africa's deadliest river animal. It was July 9th, 2016, when a flat-bottomed tourist vessel departed a riverside lodge near the base of Murchison Falls in northern Uganda. The dry season had compressed the Nile into a narrower, slower channel, and massive pods of hippos clustered in the remaining deep pools. The stretch below the falls was one of East Africa's premier wildlife viewing corridors, drawing international visitors year-round. Laurits Dekenaar was a 54-year-old pharmaceutical executive from Rotterdam, the Netherlands, who had spent a career accumulating the kind of wealth that funded ambitious travel. His recent enthusiasm for wildlife photography had produced a growing collection of close-range animal portraits that he exhibited at private events. Dekenaar had paid for a premium river excursion that morning, bringing along a camera body and long lens worth more than the boat beneath him. Dekenaar had been warned by his hotel concierge the previous evening that hippos were responsible for more tourist fatalities than any other animal on the river, advice he had dismissed as a standard scare tactic. The vessel carried 8 passengers and a guide with over a decade of experience on the Upper Nile. The guide's briefing before departure had been explicit. Passengers were to remain seated at all times, keep hands and arms inside the vessel, and avoid sudden movements near hippopods. The boat would maintain a safe distance from all animals. The first hour produced sightings of Nile crocodiles basking along the banks and several small hippo groups at a comfortable range. Dekenaar expressed visible frustration, gesturing at the distant animals and adjusting his lens repeatedly. When the guide slowed the boat to observe a pod of approximately 20 hippos in a deep pool, Dekenaar moved from his seat to the starboard side, bracing his camera against the gunwale. The guide instructed him to sit down. Dekenaar waved him off and remained standing, leaning progressively farther over the low side as the current carried the boat closer to the pod's edge. A submerged hippo surfaced without warning roughly 15 feet from the vessel, exhaling explosively. The sudden appearance startled Dekenaar, who lurched forward, lost his balance against the low railing, and fell over the side into the channel. Hippopotamuses are responsible for an estimated hundreds of human fatalities annually across sub-Saharan Africa, making them one of the continent's deadliest large animals. Adult males can weigh over 4,000 pounds and defend territories in water with extreme aggression. Their jaws can open to around 150 degrees, revealing canine teeth measuring up to 12 to 14 inches, and their bite is among the most powerful of any land animal, capable of crushing bone and severing limbs. Hippos are deceptively fast in water, capable of explosive charges through shallows that outpace any swimmer. Dekenaar surfaced less than 10 feet from the submerged male. According to the account provided by the guide and passengers, the hippo lunged in a defensive reaction before Dekenaar could orient himself. The animal's jaws clamped across his midsection with devastating force, the massive canines puncturing his torso from both sides. The bite crushed his ribcage and caused massive internal injuries. The hippo released momentarily, then re-engaged seconds later, biting down again before the guide could reposition the boat. The guide maneuvered alongside once the hippo submerged. Passengers hauled Dekenaar from the water after several attempts, the retrieval delayed by the hippo resurfacing nearby. He showed no signs of life. Laurits Dekenaar was later confirmed dead. The investigation confirmed that Dekenaar had been standing in violation of safety instructions at the time he fell overboard. The guide and tour operator were cleared of liability. While Uganda's Nile had punished one photographer's recklessness, the rivers of Australia's Northern Territory would soon claim a man who treated crocodile warning signs as suggestions. It was May 21st, 2017, and the dry season heat hung over a remote wildlife safari lodge east of Darwin in Australia's Northern Territory. The lodge sat along a tidal river system with one of the densest saltwater crocodile populations in the region. Bright yellow warning signs lined every accessible stretch of riverbank. Tavish Breckenridge was a 28-year-old electrician from Manchester, England, 18 months into an extended working holiday across Australia. Breckenridge had booked a 3-night stay at the lodge on the recommendation of co-workers at a nearby cattle station, where he had spent the previous weeks employed. He had developed a casual attitude toward the territory's wildlife warnings, which he had described to co-workers as excessive. He had joked on multiple occasions about swimming in a billabong to prove the warnings were overblown, a remark his co-workers would later recall with uncomfortable clarity during interviews with investigators. The lodge's safety briefing upon check-in had been direct. Guests were forbidden from entering the river under any circumstances. All river-based activities were conducted from vessels operated by trained guides. The manager explained that crocodiles frequented the shallows directly below the property, particularly during the dry season, when receding water concentrated animals into smaller stretches. On his second evening, Breckenridge and 2 fellow guests spent several hours drinking on the lodge's deck overlooking the river. As dusk settled, Breckenridge announced he intended to cool off in a shallow pool visible from the deck, where a natural rock shelf appeared to separate a calm pocket of water from the main channel, though the waters remained connected beneath the surface. A warning sign stood at the top of the bank access path, accompanied by a newer sign featuring a crocodile silhouette displayed in bold lettering. Both companions refused to join him, one pointing directly at the sign. A staff member who overheard told Breckenridge the pool was well within crocodile territory and that entering the water after dark was effectively suicidal. Breckenridge dismissed the warning. According to his companion's later statements, Breckenridge removed his boots and descended the bank path, wading into the pool as the last light faded. The water was murky from tidal sediment, with visibility near zero below the surface. He waded to approximately waist depth, roughly 20 feet from shore. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptiles on Earth, with dominant males in Australia's Northern Territory regularly exceeding 16 feet and weighing over 1,500 pounds. These apex predators possess one of the most powerful bites of any living animal, capable of crushing bone and tearing apart prey during a death roll. Their attack relies on remaining motionless in murky water before launching with explosive speed, clamping onto a victim, and initiating a death roll, a violent spinning maneuver that disorients prey and tears tissue before the crocodile drags its victim beneath the surface to drown. The crocodile had been resting motionless in the deeper water beyond the rock ledge, concealed entirely beneath the turbid surface. Scene reconstruction determined the animal struck from only a short distance. According to the two witnesses on the bank, the water erupted without warning. Massive jaws clamped around Breckenridge's torso, and the crocodile immediately pulled him beneath the surface. His companions reported a brief period of violent churning before the water went still. The entire attack lasted less than 10 seconds. Lodge staff initiated emergency protocols immediately. Rangers located the crocodile in a downstream pool 2 days later. Partial remains were recovered, confirming the victim's identity. The investigation confirmed that Breckenridge had entered the water voluntarily, after dark, in direct violation of the lodge's safety rules, and after receiving a direct verbal warning from staff. Toxicology analysis suggested significant alcohol consumption prior to the incident. The lodge and its staff were cleared of liability. While Australia's rivers had claimed another life lost to reckless disregard, the jungles of central India would soon prove that even a brief moment of stupidity inside a tiger reserve could be permanent. It was February 4th, 2015, when an open-top safari vehicle carrying 6 tourists departed the main gate of a tiger reserve in Madhya Pradesh, central India. The reserve's dense sal forests and bamboo thickets sheltered one of India's densest populations of Bengal tigers, with over 50 individuals tracked within the park's boundaries. Ghislain Mertens was a 44-year-old diamond trader from Antwerp, Belgium, who had traveled to India specifically to photograph Bengal tigers in the wild. Mertens had invested heavily in camera equipment and had booked 4 consecutive morning safaris to maximize his chances of a close sighting. His first 2 drives had produced only distant glimpses, and his impatience was noted by the assigned naturalist guide. The vehicle's driver, a veteran of over 8 years navigating the reserve's network of dirt tracks, operated the diesel vehicle at low speed along a route known for regular tiger activity. Park regulations were non-negotiable. Passengers were forbidden from exiting the vehicle under any circumstances. Standing was prohibited, and all visitors were required to remain seated with limbs inside the vehicle at all times. The guide reiterated these rules before departure. Approximately 90 minutes into the drive, the vehicle rounded a bend and stopped. A tigress lay in a sandy clearing roughly 60 feet from the track, partially concealed by low scrub. The guide noted through binoculars that she was accompanied by 2 cubs, barely visible in the undergrowth beside her. He whispered this information to the passengers and cautioned absolute stillness and silence. Mertens began photographing rapidly, but the angle from his seat placed a branch directly across his frame. He shifted positions twice, then stood from his seat to shoot over the obstruction. The guide pulled him down immediately. The tigress had not reacted, her head resting on her paws, apparently undisturbed. What happened next was pieced together from statements by the 5 other passengers and the guide. Mertens quietly moved toward the rear of the vehicle, swung one leg over the low side panel, and dropped to the ground on the opposite side from the tigress. The guide grabbed for his arm but missed. Mertens moved several paces from the vehicle into the open, apparently attempting to reposition for a clear shot of the tigress and her cubs without the obstructing branches. Bengal tigers are apex predators capable of weighing over 500 pounds, with muscular builds designed for explosive ambush attacks. A tiger can cover short distances at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour and bring down prey several times its own weight. Tigresses with cubs are among the most dangerous animals in any forest. Their defensive threshold drops dramatically, and perceived threats to offspring trigger immediate violent responses. A tiger's canines can exceed 3 inches, and their claws, capable of disemboweling prowling large prey, make even a single swipe potentially fatal. The tigress registered the human figure separating from the vehicle's silhouette. According to passenger accounts, she transitioned from rest to full charge in less than a second. The distance closed before anyone could react. The tigress struck Mertens from the side with overwhelming force, driving him to the ground. Her jaws closed around his throat and neck, clamping down with a suffocating grip. The driver started the engine and revved it aggressively while the guide and passengers shouted. The tigress released momentarily as the noise escalated, dropping Mertens and backing away. She held her position between him and the cubs, watching the vehicle, before finally withdrawing into the undergrowth. The guide and passengers pulled Mertens back into the vehicle. He appeared unresponsive from the moment the tigress released him. The damage to his throat was catastrophic. The vehicle raced toward the park gate, radioing ahead for medical assistance, but Ghislaine Mertens was pronounced dead before reaching the nearest medical facility. Park authorities launched an investigation, confirming through passenger testimony and the guide's account that Mertens had voluntarily exited the vehicle in direct violation of park regulations. The tigress and her cubs were not harmed. The reserve temporarily suspended safari operations for a safety review before resuming with enhanced enforcement measures. While India's forests had delivered instant consequences for one man's impatience, a wildlife reserve safari trip in Sri Lanka would soon prove that taunting a wild elephant for social media content could end in the most permanent way imaginable. It was March 17, 2018, and the afternoon heat pressed down on a dusty track winding through a wildlife reserve in southeastern Sri Lanka. The dry season had drawn wild Asian elephants toward the remaining waterholes, making sightings guaranteed for the jeep safari operators running daily excursions. A lone adult elephant stood at the track's edge. Mirodin Petrescu was a 37-year-old fitness influencer from Bucharest, Romania, whose social media following had grown rapidly through a combination of physique content and increasingly provocative travel videos. Petrescu had arrived in Sri Lanka 10 days earlier, documenting the trip for his platforms with an emphasis on close encounters with wildlife. His companion, Luminitsa Aldea, 29, sat in the rear of the open-top safari jeep. Petrescu had previously filmed himself approaching stray dogs in Istanbul and feeding wild monkeys by hand in Bali, content that had performed well enough to convince him that animals were predictable up close. The guide stopped the jeep at a safe distance and instructed the group to photograph from their seats. Petrescu expressed dissatisfaction with the distance. The guide refused to move closer. Without waiting for permission, Petrescu climbed over the side of the open jeep, carrying his phone on a selfie stick, and walked directly toward the elephant along the dirt track. The guide shouted for him to return immediately. According to the guide's account and passenger statements, Petrescu approached to within approximately 30 feet. He turned his back to the elephant and began filming himself with the animal in the background. When the elephant did not react visibly, Petrescu moved closer and began clapping his hands and stamping his feet, apparently attempting to provoke the animal into a dramatic reaction for the camera. Asian elephants are among the most powerful land animals on Earth, with adult males weighing between 8,000 and 11,000 pounds. Despite their size, elephants can accelerate to 25 miles per hour in a charge, covering short distances with startling speed. Elephants communicate agitation through ear flaring, head shaking, and mock charges before committing to full contact. However, when provoked at close range, particularly solitary males, the transition from warning to lethal charge can happen without the mock charge phase entirely. A single blow from the trunk or a front foot strike delivers thousands of pounds of crushing force. The elephant's ears flared wide, its head rose, and its trunk curled upward. Petrescu either did not recognize or chose to ignore the warning posture. He clapped his hands once more. The elephant charged without a preliminary mock charge. The acceleration was immediate, covering the remaining distance in seconds. Petrescu turned to run, but managed only a few strides before the elephant slammed into him with its head and trunk, the impact launching him onto the track surface. The elephant was on him immediately, driving its front feet down in multiple crushing stomps in quick succession. The force shattered his pelvis, spine, and ribcage in rapid succession. The animal stepped back, ears still flared, trunk raised, before turning and moving off the track into the brush. The guide drove forward immediately, reaching Petrescu within seconds. He was unresponsive. The injuries were immediately and visibly fatal. Mirodin Petrescu was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities recovered his phone from the trackside, its screen shattered. The investigation confirmed that Petrescu had voluntarily exited the vehicle and provoked the elephant in direct violation of the reserve's rules. Wildlife officials issued a public statement about the dangers of approaching wild elephants on foot. The guide and operator were cleared of liability. While Sri Lanka's reserve had claimed an influencer's life, the moonlit bush of Namibia would soon demonstrate that curiosity and darkness make a fatal combination when a leopard is feeding nearby. It was August 23, 2016, and the dry winter air across Namibia's northeastern bushveld carried sound for miles. A small, unfenced safari camp operated along a seasonal riverbed in a private conservancy bordering a major national park. The camp's remote location and lack of permanent fencing were part of its appeal, offering guests an immersive wilderness experience with nothing between them and the African bush but canvas and kerosene lanterns. Joreth Vanderkamp was a 43-year-old technology consultant from Portland, Oregon, who had booked the 3-night bush camp as the centerpiece of a Namibian safari. Vanderkamp considered himself experienced in outdoor settings, citing extensive backpacking across the American West, and had expressed amusement during the camp's evening safety briefing at what he considered excessive caution. The briefing had been thorough and direct. After dark, guests were not to leave their tents for any reason without radioing the duty staff member, who would escort them with a spotlight. Predators, including leopard, hyena, and occasionally lion, moved freely through the camp area at night. The trails between tents and the main lodge were unlit and unfenced. The camp manager repeated the radio protocol twice and confirmed each guest understood. Vanderkamp retired to his tent shortly after dinner. His tent was the farthest from the central lodge, positioned at the edge of the dry riverbed, approximately 150 feet from the nearest occupied structure. A handheld radio sat on his bedside table. According to the camp's account and the subsequent investigation, staff heard a commotion at approximately 11:40 p.m. A tracker on night duty had been aware that a large male leopard had dragged a fresh impala kill into a thicket along the riverbed earlier that evening. The kill site was approximately 80 feet from Vanderkamp's tent. Leopards are among Africa's most elusive and powerful predators, with adult males weighing up to 175 pounds, compact but extraordinarily muscular for their size. They are predominantly nocturnal hunters capable of killing prey twice their weight, using a suffocation bite to the throat. When feeding, leopards become extremely defensive of their kills, reacting with explosive violence to any perceived threat at close range. Their night vision is far more sensitive than that of humans in low light, and they move through darkness in near total silence. At close quarters, a leopard's speed and bite can inflict catastrophic damage before a victim can react. Scene reconstruction and evidence at the site indicated that Vanderkamp left his tent without his radio. His headlamp was recovered near the tent entrance, switched off. Boot tracks in the sandy riverbed showed he had moved toward the thicket where the leopard was feeding. Investigators believe he heard unfamiliar sounds carrying through the still night air and left the tent to investigate, possibly unaware of what he was approaching. The tracks showed no sign of retreat, suggesting he did not realize the danger until he was already within the leopard's defensive range. The camp tracker reached the area within minutes of hearing sounds of disturbance. He found Vanderkamp approximately 15 feet from the impala carcass, face down in the sand. The leopard had retreated a short distance and remained in the vicinity, but out of sight. The injuries were concentrated on Vanderkamp's throat, consistent with a leopard's defensive attack pattern at extremely close range. A single deep bite had penetrated the throat, causing rapid blood loss. Superficial claw marks across his face indicated brief contact before the killing bite. Based on the evidence, camp staff and investigators concluded the attack appears to have lasted only seconds. Emergency radio contact was established with the nearest town, but the camp's isolation meant medical evacuation was not possible for several hours. Vanderkamp had bled out rapidly from the throat injuries. He was confirmed dead at the scene. The investigation determined that Vanderkamp had voluntarily left his tent at night without using the radio, without a light source, and had walked directly toward an active predator feeding site. The camp and its staff were cleared of responsibility. The leopard was not pursued. While Namibia's darkness had concealed a lethal predator from one overconfident guest, a sunlit game reserve in South Africa would soon prove that broad daylight offers no protection from stupidity when a car door opens beside the wrong pride. It was October 11th, 2014, and the early spring warmth had drawn a pride of 11 lions to a patch of flattened grass alongside a paved loop road inside a self-drive game reserve in South Africa's Limpopo province. The rules were posted at the gate, printed on every ticket, and repeated on signs throughout. Windows mostly closed, doors locked, no exiting vehicles in predator zones. Denica Ashgrove was a 38-year-old marketing consultant from Brisbane, Australia, traveling through southern Africa with her partner, Warwick Ashgrove, 41, a commercial pilot. The couple had entered the reserve shortly shortly after the gates opened, joining a queue of vehicles moving slowly along the loop road. Their rented SUV offered elevated seating and clear sightlines through tinted windows. The Lion Pride was visible from over 200 yards, and a cluster of approximately 15 vehicles had formed along the road, maintaining the required closed window distance. Several lionesses and young cubs lay in the grass no more than 20 feet from the pavement, with an adult male resting slightly farther back beneath a thorn tree. The Ashgroves vehicle reached the front of the cluster. Warwick stopped the SUV alongside the nearest lionesses. Denica lowered her window fully on the passenger side to photograph the animals without glass reflection. A vehicle behind them flashed its headlights in warning. A reserve employee in a marked vehicle approximately 4 cars back began moving forward. What happened next was described by multiple witnesses in adjacent vehicles. Denica opened the passenger door and stepped 1 foot onto the pavement, her camera raised, leaning out of the vehicle to photograph the cubs lying in the grass less than 15 feet away. Several witnesses reported that the nearest lioness, which had been lying flat with her head down, raised her head the moment the door opened. African lions are apex predators, with adult females weighing between 265 and 395 pounds and possessing explosive acceleration over short distances. Lionesses are the primary hunters of the pride, evolved for ambush attacks that rely on a short, devastating charge from concealment or rest. A lion's claws can exceed 2 inches, and their bite is powerful enough to crush bone, targeting the throat and neck of prey to achieve suffocation. Lions habituated to vehicles treat them as neutral objects, but a human figure separating from a vehicle's silhouette can trigger a predatory or investigative response. The transition from a resting lion to a charging one can occur in under 2 seconds. The lioness covered the distance in a single explosive burst. Witnesses described her as moving from flat on the ground to full stride in an instant. She struck Denica before the door had fully opened, the impact knocking her from the vehicle's running board onto the pavement. The lioness's jaws clamped around Denica's neck and upper shoulder, canines penetrating deep into the throat. A second lioness was on her feet and moving toward the commotion within seconds. Warwick lunged across the center console, grabbing Denica's arm and attempting to pull her back into the vehicle, but the lioness held its bite as Warwick struggled, her weight making retrieval impossible. The reserve employee arrived within 1 to 2 minutes, using his vehicle's horn and engine to drive the lioness's back. The lioness released only when the vehicle pulled alongside, and the horn blasts became sustained. By the time the animal retreated, the injuries to her neck and throat were catastrophic and consistent with a fatal bite. Emergency medical services were dispatched, but faced a 30-minute drive from the nearest town. Denica Ashgrove was pronounced dead at the scene, on the pavement beside an open car door, as the Pride lingered nearby, some still resting while others remained alert. The investigation concluded that Denica had opened the vehicle door and partially exited in direct violation of the reserve's posted regulations. Multiple witnesses confirmed the sequence of events. The reserve issued a public statement reiterating that predator zone rules exist to prevent exactly this outcome. No action was taken against the lions.